Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a tomb so ancient that even the whispers inside have turned to dust. You're surrounded by walls painted in ochre and cobalt scenes of sacred boats and lotus flowers frozen mid-bloom. The air is still, like it hasn't moved in 3,000 years. And there, at the very center, lies her the mummy bride. She's wrapped in time itself, her linen layers woven with petal spells and secrets. But you're not here for just facts. You're here to lie down beside the past, to drift with it like a feather settling in a chamber never meant to be disturbed. You probably won't survive this wedding, by the way. If the curse doesn't get you, the drama might. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and what time it is for you. Right now, I love knowing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge carefully down a sandy slope. The torch in your hand throws a gentle flame across chipped stone walls that haven't seen light since before Rome, before Babylon cracked. You're entering the wedding chamber, though no bride ever walked down this aisle. The scent in the air is hard to place, part dry parchment, part old cinnamon with the faintest bitterness of resin. It feels alive. Or maybe that's just your nerves. The room isn't what you expected. No cobwebs, no skeletal arms reaching out. Instead, it's hauntingly beautiful. The floor is made of polished alabaster that reflects your flame like a moonlit pond. On each wall, hand-painted scenes show the same woman in different poses, kneeling before Anubis, walking under stars, placing her hand gently on a papyrus scroll. She's always alone. And there, on a raised stone dais, lies the thing you came to see. Her sarcophagus is small, barely 5 feet long, but carved with impossible detail. Gold lines curl like vines across a base of lapis blue. A pair of painted eyes stare directly up at you. They shimmer, not metaphorically, literally. The obsidian used for the pupils was polished to a mirror's shine. This isn't just a tomb, it's a love letter. And she wasn't supposed to die. That much you can tell. There's no sign of age in her features, not in the etched outline of her nose or the graceful curve of her hands folded across her chest. She was probably 17, maybe 18, the day the linen first touched her skin. Historians still argue whether she was royalty. Her name was scratched off the few tablets found near the site carefully, deliberately, like someone wanted her erased, but not entirely. Whoever buried her also made sure she would be remembered. By someone. By you, apparently. A particularly strange detail on the inner lid of the sarcophagus. There's a scene of her placing a ring on her own finger. Alone. No groom. The old priest who helped dig up the first chamber reportedly muttered she married the gods, not a man, then promptly quit archaeology forever. You get closer. You know you shouldn't, but you do. The linen is still intact, faintly yellowed, but unbroken. What's more bizarre is that someone had placed a sheer veil across the upper part of her face. Not just for modesty, it's stitched with tiny silver glyphs that read, "Beloved of the night, sleeper of the crescent moon." And then there's the dust. You thought it would be everywhere, but in this room, it clings in very specific ways. Around the sarcophagus, nothing. Perfectly clean. But the further you step back, the thicker it becomes. It's as if even dust was kept at a polite distance. A mainstream historical fact for you: many Egyptian royal brides were trained as priestesses first. They were experts in perfume-making, astronomy, and sacred rituals. Some even conducted lunar ceremonies like weddings aligned with specific moon phases. The mummy bride's tomb aligned precisely with the path of a total lunar eclipse that occurred around 1250 BCE. That's not a coincidence. Here's your fringe fact of the night. A team of researchers in the 1980s claimed that when they brought her wrappings into sunlight, the linen gave off the scent of lotus and almonds strong enough to fill a room. No one's been able to replicate that since. Some say it was just the power of suggestion. Others say, well, maybe she was waiting. You sit down on a carved bench near the far wall. Your torch crackles slightly. The flame doesn't seem to like this room. You rest your eyes for a second, just a second, and in that second you swear you hear something. The soft trailing rustle of silk brushing across stone. Not loud, just there, like breath. And just before you open your eyes again, your sleepy mind flashes an image, her veil lifting slightly. Not with wind, there's no wind down here, but with a hand. Her hand. Then silence. You take one more look at her face. She's still smiling. You blink slowly, torch still in hand, unsure if you dozed off or slipped into one of those waking dreams the tomb is rumored to conjure. The silence is unchanged, but now it feels more aware, like the air is listening. You rise, rubbing your neck, and start pacing slowly around the chamber, eyes scanning every surface. There's no plaque, no cartouche with a name. Just those ever-present painted eyes on walls, on pottery shards, even faintly etched onto the inside of a golden bracelet placed near her head. All identical, wide, watching. Who was she? And why was her name, the very soul anchor for an Egyptian afterlife, erased? You begin piecing it together with each clue as delicate as a papyrus scroll. First, the quality of the burial. This wasn't some commoner's end. The craftsmanship, the imported lapis from Afghanistan, the perfumed linen lotus blossom, and something like cedar, all of it points to elite status. Probably nobility, possibly royalty. Second, the location. Her tomb isn't near the Valley of the Kings, or nestled with the usual suspects. It's far out at the edge of a forgotten necropolis near the old oasis routes. The kind of place you'd bury someone you didn't want everyone to find, but still wanted someone to find eventually. Third, and here's the kicker, there are records. Fragmented, controversial, but still there. From the reign of Pharaoh Seti II, a scroll in disrepair mentions an unnamed flower of the court once promised to the heir, but whose union was not fulfilled due to impurity of destiny. Historians still argue whether that phrase meant illness, infidelity, or something much more scandalous, treason. But let's pause and imagine, what if she wasn't just a noblewoman? What if she was the intended bride of the pharaoh's son? Imagine the pressure, being dressed daily in linen dyed with imported saffron, being trained in ceremonial etiquette, knowing the fate of an empire might rest on how gracefully you performed a temple offering, and then to have that life snatched away before it ever began. A fringe theory suggests that she was sacrificed, offered up to a god in exchange for something. There's a faded depiction near her burial site of a lion-headed deity holding a scroll in one hand and a bloody heart in the other. Not the usual peaceful Osiris scene. You take another look at her face. The linen across her jawline is smoother than the rest, almost as if someone had touched it repeatedly. Maybe it was him, the pharaoh's son. Maybe he kept visiting. The chamber grows colder as you cross to a lower shelf embedded in the wall. It's filled with wedding items, still intact, a delicate alabaster perfume jar, a mirror with a cracked bronze backing, and an ivory comb. Then you see something odd. A small figurine of a man kneeling, arms raised not toward a god, but toward a woman figure standing above him. And it's been snapped in half. Deliberately. The ancient Egyptians were masters of symbolism. Breaking a statue wasn't just vandalism, it was metaphysical murder. You run your finger gently over the break. Rough, recent, maybe hard to tell. Back in the center of the room, her body seems to glow subtly in your peripheral vision. Not really glow, not in a cheesy horror movie way. More like her presence is outlined by contrast. Everything else here is coated in the thick patina of time. But she's preserved in stillness. Suspended. There's a mainstream fact for you: elite Egyptian mummies often had their internal organs stored in canopic jars, but hers missing. No jars in sight, which supports a newer theory that she was mummified quickly, within hours against tradition. Why the rush? And here's the fringe tidbit that goes with it. When researchers x-rayed her in the late 1990s, they found small metal discs under her tongue and eyelids, gold-plated. One had a microscopic carving, a feather, and a heart on scales, the symbol of Mayat, truth, justice, and balance. That's not typical for women. In fact, it's not typical for anyone. It was a spell usually reserved for those who'd endured trial before the gods. A celestial courtroom for the soul. So was she punished, or cleared, or more chillingly awaiting trial even now? You sit again slower this time, as if your joints suddenly remember how tired you are. The stone beneath you is warm in a way that doesn't make sense. You find yourself wondering, what was her voice like? Did she laugh? Sing? Did she speak softly? Or was she the kind who held a room just by stepping into it? You picture her walking barefoot across palace tiles, golden anklets softly jingling, trailing a line of sandalwood smoke. Maybe she was kind, maybe she was cruel, maybe she was both. Your eyelids flutter, and in that half-sleep again, she appears just behind your shoulder. Not moving, just standing, watching. Her veil billows slightly in air that does not exist, and her hand reaches slowly toward your torch. But then your head jerks up awake. The torch is fine, nothing's changed, except the veil over her face. It's moved slightly, just a few inches, closer to her lips, like a secret about to be whispered. You don't speak, you don't move, you barely even breathe. The veil, once draped neatly over her face, is now just touching the curve of her upper lip. Not a dramatic shift, but enough to freeze the blood in your fingertips. You check your torch again, still lit, still burning low and orange. No gust of wind, no open vents. No movement from you. So, how? You back away slowly, each footstep echoing louder than it should. There's a calm to the tomb, but it's the kind of calm that watches you, the kind that waits for you to say the wrong word. You turn your attention to the mural directly behind her sarcophagus. Until now, it looked like a generic funerary scene, figures of gods with jackal heads and green-skinned judges. But now, from this angle, you notice something new. There's a wedding. A man and woman face each other beneath a canopy of papyrus leaves. But the man's face is blank, literally erased, scratched out with a chisel. The woman clear, pristine, even lovingly painted. Her dress is white with gold trim arms raised in an offering gesture. Around her lotus petals drift downward, common symbol for rebirth, yes, but also for transformation. One scholar once remarked, you can tell who wrote the story by who remains in the picture. So maybe that's your first real clue. The mummy bride wasn't forgotten. Someone just made sure she remembered herself. Let's dive deeper. The wedding that never happened, historians know of it only through scattered mentions across administrative scrolls, mainly temple records and grain logs. There's talk of preparations for union of the prince around year 4 of Seti II's reign, which matches the dating of the tomb. But then silence. No guest list, no banquet list, no wedding tax or recorded public celebration, just one note scratched into a lesser-known priest's margin, lotuses cut then left to rot. That's not a great omen. Mainstream fact break, ancient Egyptian weddings weren't religious events like in modern tradition. They were more contractual domestic agreements. No formal ceremony was required. But for royalty, everything was symbolic. An official wedding meant uniting bloodlines, deities, dynasties. It had to be seen. Which makes it all the more puzzling that this one wasn't. Now, for your fringe moment, there's a hidden tomb, 200 meters from the bride's chamber, undecorated, unnamed, long ago looted, but it contains one object worth noting: a single ceremonial sandal dyed red. Red in Egypt symbolized life, and also chaos. That sandal was found snapped in two, and written on its sole feint, but visible under infrared scan, were 3 glyphs, Sedek Heru Merut. Loosely translated, he saw, he knew, he wept. Historians still argue whether that line refers to the prince, a servant, or something divine. You step back from the mural and stare at her again. Her smile isn't smug or sinister. It's wistful, like someone remembering a good day that ended too soon. A glint catches your eye near the corner of the room, something embedded in the wall. You walk over, crouch low, and brush away dust. It's a jewel, or was. A broken amulet, turquoise, framed in gold leaf, cracked in the center. It depicts a scarab beetle curled protectively around a heart, another symbol of judgment, of weighing the soul. But here's the twist. There's a 4th figure beneath it, hard to see, unless the light hits just right, a woman reaching up toward the heart with both hands, not praying, grabbing. That's not standard iconography, that's personal. Maybe she didn't wait to be judged. Maybe she refused to wait. You shift your weight to stand and realize you're standing on another tile, one that sounds hollow. Crouch again. Tap. Yep, hollow. You brush it clean and see it's carved with a spiral, a common design used for secret compartments in tombs. You're not here to loot, of course, just to listen, to witness. But curiosity, like sand in the wind, gets into everything. You pry gently with your fingers. The tile lifts with surprising ease, and beneath it, a scroll. Wrapped tightly in waxed linen, you set it on your lap, careful not to breathe too hard. The scroll crackles open. Faded hieratic script spirals outward in circles. The text isn't a prayer. It's not a spell. It's a letter. From her, it begins to the one who finds me. I dreamed of the stars again. She goes on. They were falling into the river, and I tried to catch them in my hands. My mother said I would one day marry the moon, but they took my moon away and gave me silence, so I married silence instead. You stop reading. It's too much, too personal. You look up, and her veil has shifted again. Now it rests across her cheeks, slightly bunched, as if someone had just brushed it back. Not torn, not crumpled, moved by a hand or a breeze that no one else feels. Your torch gives one last flicker and dims. The chamber isn't darker. You are. You sit frozen, still clutching the scroll, still blinking at the veil that now rests gently against her cheek. There's no sound in the tomb except the faint sizzle of your nearly dying torch and the quiet thrum of your own heartbeat in your ears. You tell yourself the veil slid down naturally, that gravity works even in cursed love stories, but something inside you, something old and reptilian, knows better. The scroll in your lap feels warmer now. Maybe from your hands, maybe not. You keep reading. You have to. They said I must not speak his name, that even thinking of him would bring ruin to the house of my father. So I kept my love in a jar. I whispered to it when the stars were loud. You pause. That line, the stars were loud. It's poetic, but you remember something, an obscure note in a 1906 excavation journal from a German team that briefly visited this region. The lead archaeologist wrote of strange, high-pitched ringing at night near the oasis burial sites. He assumed it was insects. His team packed up and left within 3 days. Mainstream history wouldn't care much, but you're starting to. You tuck the scroll away reverently, then step back into the main chamber. The mural behind the sarcophagus seems different again, or maybe it's your brain finally surrendering to the surreal. The erased groom's figure appears less erased. The silhouette faintly emerges from the scratches as though charcoal was beginning to repopulate the outline. This shouldn't be happening, but here you are. You walk around the sarcophagus once more, and there, on its left side, half hidden behind a decorative panel, you find something no one's mentioned in any report. A carving, tiny, almost careless. A pair of sandals side by side, facing opposite directions. Not a common symbol, but in Egyptian dream lore, opposing sandals meant parting, or a journey undone, or more chillingly, a wedding reversed. You step back instinctively, and your heel taps something. You glance down. A clay jar, cracked but sealed with hardened resin, barely visible in the sand. You crouch, wipe it off, and gently twist the lid open. Inside, ash, fine, dark, and bitter smelling, and nestled in it a single lotus seed. Not just any lotus. A blue lotus used in rituals for dreaming, for forgetting, and for speaking to the dead. You recall the mainstream historical use. Blue lotus flowers were soaked in wine to induce trance-like states. Pharaohs and nobles alike used them in religious rites. But a fringe theory published in an obscure 1970s journal proposed something stranger. That certain high priestesses trained to enter dream marriages would consume the lotus to spiritually unite with a god or a dead lover. Historians still argue whether these dream marriages were literal spiritual ceremonies or romanticized euphemisms for ritual death. So was she the bride of a man who died too soon, or of someone she wasn't supposed to love? Or worse, did she choose to be sealed away to chase him into the afterlife herself? You're starting to piece together a picture that doesn't make sense in textbooks. A noble bride set to marry royalty, a sudden end to the wedding, a strange burial away from the court, a veil with silver thread, a missing heart jar, and now this, a scroll confessing a secret love. You glance up. Her lips. Were they always parted like that? Only slightly, but enough to suggest she's mid-breath or mid-whisper. You shake your head. You have to get out of the chamber for a minute. You follow a narrow corridor just off the main room, lit only by your sputtering torch. The walls close in, slightly claustrophobic, almost pulsing. You arrive in what appears to be a side chamber, sparse, except for a single statue of Bastet, the cat goddess, carved from dark stone. She's usually depicted with serenity. This version, she looks alert, her eyes wide, claws extended, and in her lap sits something unexpected, a necklace. Delicate gold chain strung with alternating charms, eyes, tears, and tiny beetles. You pick it up carefully. A small tag beneath it says, "For the protector of dreams." Maybe this was meant for a guardian, a spiritual watchman, or maybe for you. You place it gently back. You don't need more responsibility in this haunted honeymoon suite. As you re-enter the main chamber, something stops you cold. On the floor near her feet, bare stone just moments ago is now a ring. Small, gold, still warm. Your fingers tremble as you pick it up. Inside the band, carved in tiny script, are the words "Return when the stars fall again." You stare at it. You don't know what that means. You don't know if you want to know. But you're already in too deep. You kneel beside her, suddenly aware that your torch has finally died. But you don't feel afraid. Just quiet. You look up, and though you cannot swear it, you could almost believe her lips moved. You sit there cloaked in darkness, holding the gold ring in your hand like it might start humming or glowing or suddenly melt through your fingers. It doesn't. It's just warm. Warm in a tomb that hasn't felt sunlight in over 3,000 years. You slide the ring into your pocket not because you're stealing it, but because something tells you you're meant to carry it for a while. You've become a part of this story, like it or not. The silence in the chamber has shifted again. It's not oppressive, but attentive. You're not alone, and it's not because the mummy moved. Not physically, but her presence, whatever that means, fills the room now. Heavier, quieter. You close your eyes for a second, trying to reset your mind, but instead, you fall right back into it. You're at the wedding, but it's not hers. Not yet. It's the one that should have happened. You're standing among rows of lotus garlands, inhaling the mix of myrrh and palm oil, watching guests in white linen and lapis jewelry sip from gold-rimmed cups. She enters slowly, escorted by musicians. Her dress glows like sunlight reflected off water, but her face is grim. Then everything stops. The music, the crowd, even the breeze. She turns her head and looks straight at you. And in that suspended moment, the sky turns red. You blink. You're back in the tomb. Your torch is completely out, but your eyes are adjusting. A faint glow, phosphorescent, maybe seeps from the mural behind her sarcophagus. Not bright, just enough to cast the lightest blue across the chamber. You breathe, carefully. You remember the crocodile, or rather, the legend of the crocodile curse. It sounds ridiculous now, but in ancient Egypt, crocodiles weren't just beasts. They were divine feared and worshipped. Sobek, the crocodile-headed god, represented fertility power and terrifying judgment. Some accounts say the bride was cursed after disrespecting a priest of Sobek. Others claim she loved a priest of Sobek, and it was the pharaoh who cast the curse out of jealousy. Historians still argue whether Sobek's temple even existed near this tomb site. Most maps show nothing. But one brittle papyrus stored in Cairo describes the Temple of Scaled Silence near a cluster of oasis burials. And here's a detail no one explains: that same papyrus includes a sketch of a bridal figure wearing a necklace of crocodile teeth. You haven't seen that necklace yet. You wonder, did she wear it? Or was it stolen? Or worse, was it buried with someone else? You move to the far wall of the chamber where an alcove holds 5 small jars. Not the classic canopic jars, but narrower, more decorative. You lift one carefully. It's sealed with wax, but the glyph on the front makes your spine tighten. It's a stylized crocodile biting down on a flower. Inside, it turns out, is only sand, dry fine and glinting slightly. A fringe report from the 1930s claimed that cursed sands were used to bind unwanted spirits in pre-dynastic tombs. Basically, a magical timeout. But modern analysis says the sand just contains mica flakes. Nothing dangerous, nothing magical. Still, you seal the jar quickly. You glance back at her. You know what you need to find now. Not a necklace. A temple. You leave the chamber not because you're done, but because her story is widening. It's no longer confined to these stone walls. Outside, the desert night is still. You walk by moonlight across dunes that feel more like waves. The wind brushes softly across your ears like whispers behind a curtain. About 20 minutes from the tomb, assuming you're walking slowly, still processing everything, you crest a small ridge and freeze. Below you, in a slight dip between hills, lie the broken remains of something once enormous. Massive stone blocks scattered in a square pattern, carved pillars partially buried in sand. One of them bears a relief, a crocodile with outstretched claws. You've found it, or what's left of it. You step down into the ruins, brushing away sand from each block. Symbols repeat: lotus crocodile spiral, spiral again. That same spiral from the stone beneath her chamber. There's a broken altar, not central, off to one side. And behind it, a wall, still intact and painted. The mural shows a woman, her standing at the edge of a lake, placing something into the water. It looks like her heart. Not metaphorical, literal. She's holding a golden bowl, and within it is a small red shape. She releases it into the black water, and behind her stands a figure with a crocodile head and a broken crown. You touch the mural. The paint is flaking, but under your fingers, the stone feels warmer. And just below the scene, in smaller symbols, a prayer. May she be judged by silence and swallowed by love. What does that even mean? Was she sacrificed willingly? Or was love itself the sacrifice? You step back, heart full of questions you may never answer. And then you see it carved above the mural, just barely visible. A ring, identical to the one in your pocket. You stare up at the ring carved above the mural. It's unmistakably the same thickness, the same subtle diagonal mark crossing the band, the same aura of quiet finality. This isn't just a symbol, it's a map, a loop, a thread stitched through time connecting her chamber to this forgotten ruin, and now to you. You reach instinctively into your pocket, feel the real ring there, still warm. You take it out, hold it against the stone. Perfect match. And just as your fingers brush the carved version, you hear it. Water. A single drop, then another. But you're in the desert. There's no water. You turn. There, behind a cracked pillar, moisture glistens faintly in the moonlight, seeping from between two ancient slabs. Curious and half certain you're hallucinating from sleep deprivation, you move closer. The stones shift slightly under your weight. One leans inward. You brace your hand against it carefully, reverently, and push. A hollow echo. The stone slides open. Behind it, a narrow staircase, descending. The air that rises from it smells of salt incense and old secrets. You descend slowly, feet sliding slightly on smooth steps worn by centuries. Your hand traces the wall, following a faint pattern of raised spirals carved deep into the sandstone. You count them. 21. Then the pattern ends. You step into a second chamber. Small, damp. The floor here is slick, almost polished. In the center lies a black stone basin no larger than a kitchen sink. Inside it, still water, perfectly still. You see your reflection and someone else's. You whip around. No one. You lean in again. There, her. But not the mummy, not the shrouded figure. This is her before. Her eyes are open and they are full of something you can't place. Not sorrow, not fear, not even love. Resolve. You blink and the image vanishes. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian rituals often included a mirror pool, a basin of dark water used to consult the divine or to see omens. Priests believed that looking into the water at the right phase of the moon could show you the past or the gods. Fringe belief that those who had been spiritually unbound could reach back through these pools, not to be seen, but to show. You dip a finger into the basin, cold, bone cold. The water shivers and spreads. An image forms. You see a young man clothed in pale linen bent over a table. He's writing, furiously, a letter, maybe the letter. His hands tremble. Behind him stands an older figure, a priest, perhaps silent, unmoving. The man dips his ring into ink and seals the scroll. And then he presses the ring to his lips, the same ring you're holding. And the vision ends. You're shaking now, not from fear, but from recognition. You're no longer an observer, you're caught in the weave. You look around the chamber again and spot a niche in the far corner. Inside, a small wooden box, blackened with age but bound in bronze. You lift the lid. Inside, petals, dozens of them, pressed, preserved, and still faintly fragrant. Lotus, blue and white. And at the bottom, wrapped in papyrus, a necklace of crocodile teeth strung on silk thread. You lift it gently. It's heavier than you expect, cold to the touch. This must be it. You remember that mural again, her offering her heart to the water, and standing behind her, the crocodile god. Historians still debate whether Sobek was ever seen as a god of love. Traditionally, he's more about strength, chaos, fertility, but some texts suggest that Sobek had a dual nature, that he could devour and protect, that he could judge and forgive. So maybe this wasn't a curse after all. Maybe it was a choice. You turn back toward the basin and gently lower the necklace into the water. The water doesn't splash, it accepts. Ripples form, spiral outward, then vanish. You turn to leave, but pause. The carved ring on the wall now has something new beside it, a name. You squint. The script is stylized ceremonial, but you can just make it out. Setari. Her name. You say it aloud. Setari. The chamber breathes, just once, and then stillness. You retrace your steps up the stone stairway out into the desert stars glittering like pinholes in velvet. You look back once. The entrance is sealed again, as if it never opened. When you return to her tomb chamber, everything is as it was. Almost. The veil. Gone. Folded neatly beside her, and her lips. Closed. At peace. You don't speak. You don't dare. The chamber is silent, but not the same kind of silence you stepped into all those hours, or was it days ago? This is a settled silence. A satisfied one, like a story has finally been told, even if its words were scattered across ruins, petals, and fragments of breath. Setari. You repeat her name silently as you lower yourself to the stone bench once more, the same bench from the first time you laid eyes on her. But now you're not a stranger. You're something else, a guest who stayed long enough to be remembered. You glance at the scrolls you uncovered, the broken figurine, the empty canopic jar niche, and the place where the veil now rests gently folded as if placed by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. And then something catches your eye. The mural behind her sarcophagus, remember the one with the erased groom, the one that seemed to shift each time you looked at it. Now it's whole. 2 figures. Her and him. The man's face is no longer blank. It's detailed, smiling softly with a circlet of braided gold around his brow and a hand extended toward her. She's reaching out in return, their fingers just barely touching. But something is different about this scene. Unlike typical Egyptian mural-style, rigid profile, symbolic, this one is tender. There's weight to it. Emotion. The artist wasn't just recording a ceremony, they were honoring a moment. And beneath their outstretched hands, a tiny inscription newly revealed in moon-pale pigment. Joined beyond the judgment of men. You lean closer, breathing in shallow, because somehow you understand. This wasn't a wedding that failed. It was a wedding that waited. The pieces start to lock into place like ancient puzzle tiles shifting into alignment. She was promised to royalty, yes, but her heart belonged elsewhere, to a man forbidden by bloodlines, caste politics, or priesthood. Maybe a commoner, maybe a priest, maybe someone exiled from the court. But the love was real, too real. So the pharaoh intervened, maybe not cruelly, maybe even regretfully, but decisively. The marriage was halted. The man disappeared. She was silenced, but not erased. She was buried with markers, with scent trails, with messages for someone bold enough or foolish enough to trace her path backward. You glance down at your hands. You've carried her words, worn her ring, walked her footsteps. And now, you're about to see what lies behind her, literally. Because as you rise, eyes adjusting further, you notice something no one else documented. The dais on which her sarcophagus rests is not one solid block of stone. It's actually a plinth crafted from 4 fitted slabs. And one of them has a groove along its edge. You crouch, run your fingers along the seam. Then you press. It shifts. Not easily, but enough. And slowly, achingly slowly, the back wall of the chamber clicks and slides open not far, just enough to reveal a tunnel, low, narrow, and lined with gold-framed tiles. You pause. You really could turn back now. But of course you don't. You enter. The tunnel curves slightly downward. The temperature drops. The air smells less of dust and more of old incense mingled with something floral. The passage opens into a small circular chamber. And there, at its center, is a second sarcophagus. Smaller, plainer, but unmistakably placed with reverence. You approach slowly. On its lid is no painted face, no elaborate goldwork, just a single symbol, the spiral. The same spiral you saw beneath the ring tile, the same pattern that guided you to the temple, the same one she carved into the very flow of her story. You brush dust off the stone. There's no plaque, no name. But, you know, this is him. Whoever he was, priest, servant, guard, scribe, this is the man Setari loved. And he's here, not in some forgotten grave or royal archive. He was buried beneath her, protected, hidden, waiting. Historians still argue whether dual burials like this were ever sanctioned for forbidden couples. Technically, they weren't, but some high-ranking embalmers, especially those sympathetic to Osiris or Anubis, were known to bend rules for tragic lovers. There's a fringe theory that a few tombs were intentionally designed to reunite couples not allowed to marry in life. But this is no theory. This is the real thing. You kneel between them, his tomb below hers above. You can feel the spiral, not carved, not painted, just present, like a thread looping around you, drawing you in, holding you still. The silence in this space is different again, deeper, not watching, not waiting, just full. You stay there for a while, minutes, maybe hours. You lose track, the kind of timelessness reserved for the ends of very old stories. And when you rise, you leave the ring, not out of fear, but respect. It wasn't yours to keep. You place it gently between the two tombs, a bridge, a promise returned. And as you back away, you whisper her name again, Setari. And maybe you hear someone whisper back, not in words, but in peace. You step backward slowly, the same way you'd back away from a sleeping animal, cautious, reverent, strangely unwilling to break the spell that now blankets the space. Setari above, her beloved below, and in between them, your footprints, your breath, your heartbeat. As you retreat down the golden tiled passage, each step away feels heavier, like gravity is thicker in this place. But it's not sorrow pulling you down, it's completion. You emerge back into her main chamber, blinking as if surfacing from underwater. The air feels lighter, warmer. You glance one last time at her sarcophagus, and though her face remains still, something about the room feels unmistakably relieved. The kind of stillness that follows the final note of a song that's waited too long to be played. You sit again briefly, letting yourself feel the shift. This isn't just history anymore, it's ritual. You were part of it whether you intended to be or not. And then, with reluctant resolve, you rise, brush the sand from your clothes, and turn to leave the chamber when you notice something on the wall beside the entrance. A handprint, faint faded, too small to be yours, but clearly human. You reach up, place your hand next to it. A strange alignment, almost a perfect match in shape, but not size. Hers is smaller, more delicate. Still, the gesture lingers in the air. A wave goodbye. Or maybe a thank you. You move into the outer corridor past the jackal statues and the cracked jars, stepping out into the dry air of the necropolis. The stars overhead are brighter than you remember, burning silver against black velvet. You breathe in deeply. For the first time in hours, maybe days, you feel present in your own body again. And yet, the story isn't finished, because stories like this never really are. You decide not to return directly to the camp. Instead, you head toward the small oasis where it all began. Remember the one that hosted her moonlit funeral. It's a little more than a dry crater now, but in your mind, you can see it palm trees, swaying torches flickering in the wind, a procession of white linen and myrrh and incense. There you sit beside the cracked basin where camels once drank and brides were once blessed. And you recall something, an old tale told by a local guide. That in times long past, a princess was seen walking the edge of this oasis during certain moon phases, always at night, always alone, always barefoot. She left no footprints, but people said the reeds swayed after her like even plants remembered her name, Setari. You close your eyes, and it all comes back. The painted eyes on the sarcophagus, the scroll beginning with "I dreamed of the stars again," the crocodile teeth necklace shimmering like wet bone, the second tomb, the warm ring, and now one final fragment. As you sit in that dry hollow, your hand brushes something in the sand. Not stone, not bone, paper, crisp yellowed, folded like a letter. You hesitate, then open it. Inside a drawing, a single spiral, and underneath it 5 words. Some dreams wait, some return. You stare at it for too long, and when you finally look up, the stars seem just a little closer, as if 1 or 2 have drifted down just shy of touching the earth. You stand. No footsteps follow you, no whispers, no glowing eyes. But in your chest, something lingers. A thread, a story, a presence. She's gone, yes, but not forgotten. Not anymore. And somewhere deep beneath layers of earth, in ink and ceremony, 2 lovers are finally still. Together. You return to camp just before dawn, your shoes heavy with sand, and your thoughts even heavier. No one asks where you've been. The other researchers are still asleep or pretending to be. A few torches flicker low. A kettle boils weakly over a stubborn fire. But something's shifted. You feel it in your shoulders, your breath, the way the wind brushes against your ears. You sit at the edge of the tent flap, not quite ready to rejoin the world. The desert stretches before you like a memory you don't want to wake from. And in the distance, just barely, you see the tomb mound. Still, quiet, whole. You could tell them. You could call a meeting show. The ring described the second chamber. The mural restored the necklace, the scrolls. But something in you says, not yet. Because this story isn't meant for excavation, not the usual kind anyway. It's meant to be carried. You go to your bag, dig through the zippers and wrappers and crushed maps until you find your notebook. You tear out a clean page. You draw the spiral, just once. Then below it, you write her name, Setari. You stare at the name for a long while. There's something powerful about seeing it on paper, something that defies how long it's waited to be written. Later at breakfast, one of the archaeologists casually mentions a strange thing. You know that mummy, her lips look different now. You say nothing, just smile. You know. Back at the Cairo Museum weeks later, you notice another change. Not to her body, not to her display, but to the lighting. It's warmer, subtler. Someone's placed fresh lotus petals near the glass. Not official procedure, of course, but no one's moved them either. And you swear in the dimness for just 1 second, her smile looks fuller. Or maybe it's just you. There's a mainstream museum plaque beside her now. It doesn't name her officially, she's still the nameless noblewoman of the Western necropolis. But it does include a quote, unattributed. She married silence, and silence remembered. You check the guest book beside her case. Thousands of names, scribbles, doodles. One, however, stands out. A child's writing simple and direct. She looks like she's dreaming. And that's the thing, isn't it? Dreams don't end, not the real ones. They shift, they settle, they wait in quiet places until someone brave or foolish enough walks into them with open eyes. You've become part of hers, and she's become part of yours. There's a fringe theory, almost no one believes it, that certain mummies were placed in emotive tombs, spaces designed not just to preserve a body, but to preserve feeling. Grief, longing, hope. You're a believer now. Because Setari's tomb didn't just hold her bones. It held a pause. 3,000 years of breath between a love cut short and a promise fulfilled. You imagine her once more standing beneath the moon, that crocodile teeth necklace glinting at her collar, her veil trailing behind her like mist. She's waiting, but not helpless. She chose this. Silence chose the spiral, chose to be remembered, not as a bride denied, but as a bride who waited. Historians still argue whether her story was ever meant to be found. You know the truth. It was meant to be found by you. And maybe someone else will find it again long after you're gone. The spiral always returns. Back home now, miles from the desert, from the dust and the perfume of old incense, you still feel her. Setari lingers in your thoughts, in your dreams, in the gentle circular movement your fingers make while stirring coffee, sketching absent-mindedly, tracing patterns on your pillowcase. Spirals. Always spirals. You try to move on. You answer emails, sort artifacts, lecture about the architectural symmetry of New Kingdom tombs, smile politely when someone jokes about mummy curses. But the truth is, you're haunted, not in the scary movie way, in the beautiful, unbearable way that only unresolved things cling to you. Because even though her smile rests now and her story has been told, something's missing. One afternoon, while reviewing dig site photos, you notice a detail that escaped you. A stone. In the original photos from the tomb, right beside the carved sandals, you see a flat reddish stone with unusual grooves. You remember stepping near it. You even brushed dust off it, but you didn't realize what it was. Because you didn't look closely. You zoom in. The grooves form a design simple but unmistakable. A map. Not geographical, but spiritual. It's a funerary path, known in rare cases where tombs were designed to mimic the soul's journey through the duat, the Egyptian underworld. But this one ends in a spiral. And beside the spiral is a single hieroglyph. A feather. Ma'at. Truth, balance, justice. You remember the gold disc beneath her tongue, the feather, and the heart. She was judged, but she also chose to be judged. You return to your notes, to the scroll, to the mirror pool where her reflection flickered beside your own. And you realize something. Setari wasn't waiting to be saved. She was waiting to witness. Not her own story, but yours. The final twist isn't about her wedding. It's about what she left behind. You reach for your notebook, the one with her name, the spiral. You flip to the last page. Blank. You write, she dreamed of the stars again. And then beneath it, you draw two figures, hand in hand. Small, simple, and below that a doorway. You stare at it, not for interpretation, just to see. Then you blink, because you swear, just for a second, the spiral on the page moves. Not like it's alive, like it's opening. Mainstream history doesn't deal in such things. but fringe archaeology. Some scholars insist that ancient tombs functioned as dream machines, not metaphorically, literally, places designed to synchronize the conscious mind with the divine, not death traps, dream chambers. And some say, if you complete the dream of the entombed, you carry it with you. You become a bearer. And one night you do. You dream, not of sand or tombs, not of scrolls or glowing eyes. You dream of her, but not the mummy, not the priestess, not the princess. You dream of Setari, alive. She sits beside a still pool under a moon the color of pearls. In her hands a ring. She dips it in water, hands it to someone. To you. You take it, and suddenly the pool becomes a mirror again. You see a younger version of yourself, then older, then Setari, smiling, watching. The dream ends softly, no fear, no rush, just a feather landing. You wake with a name in your mouth, Setari. You whisper it, and feel for a breathless moment like someone whispers it back. You wake before dawn, startled but not shaken, like your body knows something important happened while you slept and is giving you time to understand. You sit up listening, not to sounds, but to the stillness around them, the kind that carries messages in silence. You reach for your notebook again. This time, the spiral you drew the night before seems softer, not changed exactly, but settled, like a ripple that has finally reached the edge of the water. You flip back through your notes, your sketches, your fragments of thoughts from the dig. One phrase keeps appearing. She chose silence. But the more you read, the more it transforms. She didn't choose silence. She commanded it. Her entire tomb, every mural symbol sent, was not just a record of a tragic bride. It was an act of will. A story set in motion, sealed in linen and gold, with only one way to end being heard. And that's what you did. You told her story. You remember a quote scratched into an amphora from a temple ruin near Edfu. To name a thing is to wake it. You named her. You woke her, but not to bring her back. No, you woke her to let her rest. You begin typing your report, a formal one meant for the institute, the university archives, and the dull academic journals that have never believed in crocodile curses or dreaming brides. You strip out the emotion, remove the warmth. Just facts, timelines, artifacts, dated soil layers, glyphal context. But then, you open a private document, one not meant for review. And there you write the real story. The story of Setari, of the ring, the veil, the second tomb, the necklace, the scrolls. You even describe the dream. Historians still argue whether dreams belong in academic record. You no longer care. You print it, bind it, place it in your personal archives labeled simply, "She waited." Weeks pass, seasons shift, life resumes its pace. But Setari stays with you, in soft ways. You dream more often now and not always of her, sometimes of temples, of moonlight on water, of spirals drawn in ash. Sometimes you wake and smell cinnamon in the air. Sometimes you open a book and find petals tucked into the spine you don't remember placing. And once while preparing a presentation on funerary practices, your PowerPoint fails and the background resets to an image you've never seen before. A mural of two figures, standing hand in hand beneath a night sky filled with stars that seem to shimmer. Your laptop crashes immediately afterward. You don't try to recover the image. You don't need to. It's already printed into your mind. Mainstream Egyptologists believe most anonymous mummies are lost forever, stripped of names, identities, even genders in some cases. Without a cartouche or funerary stela, they're cataloged by the features of their sarcophagus or linen wrap style. But now there's one exception. You've begun calling her Setari in every personal document, quietly, confidently, and others follow suit. Interns whisper the name during cataloging. One even swears the humidity monitor blinks slightly whenever it's spoken aloud near the display case. Museum staff don't dismiss it. They just note it. Respectfully. You overhear a child at the exhibit, once standing on tiptoe nose nearly against the glass. She points to the mummy and says she looks like she's listening. And, you know, she is. One afternoon, while dusting the archive shelf in your personal office, you notice a faint mark near the edge, a little swirl. A spiral. You didn't draw it, but you smile, because someone did. There's a fringe belief too obscure to publish, passed around in late-night conversations between tired diggers and dreamers, that some tombs don't just preserve people, they preserve intentions. And if the intention is strong enough, It echoes. Satari didn't want revenge. She didn't want resurrection. She wanted reunion. And now she has it. Months roll forward like slow dunes in windless desert. Conferences come and go, filled with slideshows of pottery shards and stratigraphy charts, while you sit politely nodding along even as part of your mind drifts back to sandstone corridors and veiled smiles. Everyone else has moved on from the dig, but not you, because the story hasn't ended. Not entirely. It's in little things. Like how the museum's exhibit about her, the nameless noblewoman, begins to quietly change. A new placard appears, small, unofficial, presumed to have been a ceremonial bride buried under lunar alignment. Local name, Setari. No one knows who added it. No one removes it either. Visitors ask for her now, not the mummy. Setari. And every time you hear someone whisper it, you feel a ripple in the air, like the word is still learning how to echo. You get a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside is a photograph. It's of a stone weathered, nearly buried in sand. On its surface, the spiral, and below it, a single word etched in delicate script. Return. No explanation, no note, just that one word. You don't hesitate. A month later, you're back in Egypt. Not with a team. Alone. You carry light, just one bag, a canteen, a small notebook. You know exactly where you're going. The tomb greets you without ceremony, its entrance still half swallowed by sand just as you left it. But now you know the way. You descend again, your steps quiet and certain as if the very stone remembers you. The chamber is untouched, but different. Her veil is gone, still folded beside her, but the lotus petals have multiplied. Something has left fresh ones. You circle the sarcophagus, not out of suspicion, out of respect. The mural behind her still shows the joined hands. But now there's a new detail, a tiny bird, perched above the couple, wings raised, painted in soft gold. The symbol forbade the soul in flight. You take out the ring. Yes, the ring. You left it between the tombs, but days later it appeared in your luggage. You hadn't packed it. You couldn't have. But it was there, warm, waiting. You place it on the stone dais beside her hand, not on her finger, just beside it. A choice, a presence, and something answers. A breeze, soft, impossible. There's no opening here, no wind, but the veil flutters. Just once, and settles. You kneel. You speak her name again, Setari, and for the first time you say the second name aloud, the one you've only whispered in your thoughts. Ahmin, the name found in that secondary tomb, long rubbed away from any official scrolls, a name preserved in silence. Setari and Ahmin, lovers undone, lovers reunited. Mainstream Egyptologists might scoff. Two names without royal titles, no scrolls, no statue. But fringe historians, they whisper. They point to the carvings, the alignment of the tombs, the letters, the ring, the dreams. And one by one they start to believe. You stay in the tomb for hours, maybe days. Time stretches again in that gentle, impossible way. You speak to her, not to the mummy, to Setari. You tell her what's changed, what stayed the same. You talk about the children who visit her exhibit, the tourists who leave lotus petals, the old woman who knelt beside her display for a full hour without saying a word. You leave nothing out, because now you know. She hears. She always has. Before you leave, you walk once more into the hidden chamber below. The air is still, but his sarcophagus feels warmer now. Not hot, just awake. You rest your hand on it, not to ask for anything, just to say, I saw you, and maybe that's what he was waiting for too. You climb the tunnel again. The spiral flickers in your mind like a pulse, a heartbeat. Not yours, not hers, theirs. And somewhere far above, under the desert stars, you swear you hear music. Not from instruments, not from voices, but from stone and memory, and a wedding finally fulfilled. The music fades before you reach the surface like a lullaby slipping beneath the veil of sleep. The desert greets you not with fanfare, but with soft warmth, the early evening air brushing across your face like a silk veil, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand attention, just respect. You turn once more to the tomb entrance. It looks smaller now, not physically, but symbolically, as if the story it held has finally shrunk back to rest content, to sleep once more. You do something unexpected. You kneel just outside the entrance where the sand shifts with each breath of the wind. You draw a spiral there, not large, just enough. Then you stand, dust your palms, and walk away. Not fast, not slow, just forward. You spend the night at the nearest outpost, a quiet guest house run by a family who remembers your face but doesn't ask questions. That's the way of the desert. It keeps what matters and lets the rest scatter in the wind. That night, you dream again. You're not in the tomb. You're somewhere open under stars beside a river that gleams like polished obsidian. Two figures walk ahead of you, a woman and a man, Setari and Akhmin. They don't speak. They don't look back. They don't need to. Their hands are joined, and in their wake, lotus petals bloom from the water, one by one. You wake up with tears in your eyes and laughter in your chest. For the first time, there's no ache, only peace. A few weeks later, back in your office, you receive a package. No return address, no stamp. Inside, a single object, a tiny amulet made of carnelian and shaped like a spiral. Attached to it, a note on linen-like parchment. Dreams are buried only until someone listens. You place it on your desk. You don't touch it. You don't need to. From that moment on, every lecture you give carries a little more stillness, a little more awe, a little more space for mystery. You no longer separate facts from wonder. You layer them, like linen over bone, like scent over memory, like name over silence. Mainstream scholars invite you to speak now, but not just about tombs or dynasties. They ask you about Setari. You always smile before answering, because her story is no longer bound by artifacts. It's a living thing, a dream. You show students the spiral, talk about the power of unnamed spaces, the tenderness of unfinished stories, the importance of witnessing. And sometimes, just sometimes, you catch one of them doodling spirals in their notebook. You don't stop them. You nod. One evening, long after everyone's gone home, you find yourself back at her display in the museum. You stand there a while. She looks the same. But something about her posture, her presence feels lighter. You say nothing, until as you're turning to leave, you murmur one word under your breath. Thank you. And for a moment, barely a second so brief you could dismiss it as imagination, you see something flicker in the glass. A reflection, not yours, hers. Smiling. Months pass, then a year. The world spins forward, exhibits change, new tombs are found, new theories are proposed. But Setari stays exactly where she's always been, wrapped in linen and mystery, gently resting behind her glass enclosure. Yet something's different now. Not in her position, or the lighting, or the temperature-controlled room, but in how people see her. You start to notice it in the museum guestbook. Not just names and times, but sketches, spirals, petals, the occasional ring. Someone writes in careful cursive, "I felt like she knew I was there." You don't laugh. You nod, because yes, she probably did. And as more visitors lean in close to her case, something passes between them. Not fear, not morbid curiosity. Connection. You attend a panel about the evolution of funerary artifacts, a fancy way of talking about death boxes. But one speaker, a young graduate student, mentions Setari by name. By name. You make eye contact with her afterward. She doesn't explain how she knew. You don't ask. But she says quietly, "She's why I studied this. Her smile stayed with me." And again you nod. Because yes, it does that. Meanwhile, your private journal grows thicker, not with academic notes, but with fragments, dreams, sketches of altars, half-remembered inscriptions, translations you don't quite trust, but write down anyway. One entry simply reads, "She chose sleep because love needed time." You begin to teach a new course. You call it Echoes and Endings Memory in Ancient Burial Practice. The students think it's about tomb layouts, and it is. But it's also about spirals and silences, and how some stories take 3,000 years to exhale. You take your class to the museum every semester. At her exhibit, you don't lecture. You let them stand quietly watch her. Once a student says she looks like she's about to tell you something, but she's waiting to see if you're listening. You almost tear up. You say, "That's the most accurate thing I've ever heard." And after a long pause, you add, "She already told me everything. Now she's watching to see who else is ready." The spiral amulet still sits on your desk. One night during grading, it falls off by itself, just tips forward. When you pick it up, you find a small groove on the underside. Inside it, a single grain of sand. Desert sand. You haven't been back in a while. You feel the pull. And then one day, the invitation arrives. A private foundation is funding a return expedition not to uncover new tombs, but to reevaluate lesser-known necropolis sites. Your name is at the top of the list. You don't even think twice. 2 months later, you're back in Egypt. This time, the team is smaller, more respectful. Some know the stories. Some just sense there's something deeper happening. You visit her tomb first. Of course, it hasn't been touched, but the air inside feels expectant. You set down a new offering, a spiral carved into a piece of wood you brought from home. Walnut, smooth. And beside it, a tiny note. Still listening. The mural hasn't changed, but the way you see it has. Setari's gaze, once mournful, now seems calm. Final. Known. Later in the evening, your team reviews drone scans of nearby ridges. One image stands out, a near-perfect spiral carved into a stone plateau half buried. It's far from her tomb. No official markings. No GPS data places it there before, but you know it's real. Because spirals don't need permission to appear. They arrive when the story is ready to turn again. You reach the plateau just before sunrise. The sand is cool beneath your boots, and the air is that hushed, golden silence that only deserts know how to offer, neither dark nor light, but something in between. The spiral is real, etched deep into the flat stone, weathered yes, but unmistakable, larger than the one from the tomb. This one you could stand inside if you dared, and you do. You step into the outermost ring, careful, deliberate. Each circle draws you inward, not just geographically, but emotionally, like descending into memory. The center is bare, no inscription, no altar, just stone and stillness. But when you close your eyes, you feel her again. Setari, not as a mummy, not as a figure behind glass, but as a voice, a presence, not speaking to you, speaking through you. You kneel, not for ceremony, for clarity. You press your palm to the stone and feel warmth, not sun, but recognition. And in your mind, another image unfolds. A wedding. Not the broken one from the murals. A different one, a quiet one, a secret one. 2 people beneath a tree at night. A bowl of water between them. No crowns, no witnesses. Just 2 hearts exchanging promises with nothing but the stars for a canopy. This was the real ceremony. The one not written in scrolls. The one not approved by priests. The one that made everything else worth waiting for. You open your eyes. A gust of wind rushes across the plateau, scattering sand in looping arcs that trace around the spiral. For a moment, it almost looks alive. You return to camp changed again, or maybe just more yourself. You document the spiral carefully, professionally, GPS coordinates, high-res scans, notations, but you also include something extra, a single footnote. This formation bears similarity to the iconography discovered in Tomb 17A, commonly referred to as Setari's resting place. Its position suggests intentional alignment with her tomb, purpose unclear. And then privately, in your journal, the spiral is not a location, it's an invitation. Back home, the world spins on, cities hum, screens glow, deadlines arrive like sandstorms. But the spiral remains in you. You see it in raindrops circling a puddle, in the curl of steam above tea, in the lazy motion of someone drawing circles absent-mindedly during a meeting. It's not just a symbol anymore, it's a way of being, a way of listening, and others begin to listen too. A graduate student emails you, "I had a dream about her. Is that normal?" Another sends a poem, untitled. The last line simply reads, "She waited for the right ears." You start a seminar series, quiet, invite-only off-campus. You call it Waking the Silent. It's not about ghosts, it's about memory. It's about asking why some names vanish, and why others rise from the sand when they're needed most. Setari becomes more than a mummy, more than a name. She becomes a pattern, a whisper of how stories refuse to die. And you begin to wonder, how many others are out there waiting? Not for fame, not for fanfare, just for someone to kneel at the center of the spiral and listen. The years begin to layer themselves like the linen that once wrapped Setari thin, soft, nearly weightless on their own, but together they press gently on your shoulders. You feel older, but not in the usual way. More rooted. The spiral is now with you in every quiet moment. You teach, yes. You publish. But your work no longer chases acclaim. It moves differently now, like tidewater returning to shore, not to impress, but to remember. You visit her when you can. Not always in person. Sometimes just in thought. Sometimes in dreams. And occasionally on rare goosebump-raising nights you hear her. Not as words, but as feeling. Like a page turning somewhere behind your eyes. It's during one such night that you receive an email from a colleague in Luxor. A dig turned up something strange, a sealed chamber beneath a collapsed structure near the Nile's edge. The markings don't match the surrounding architecture, but one symbol repeats faint but clear: a spiral. You're on the next plane. When you arrive, the team is respectful, curious, but reverent. They've read your work. Some even carry spiral amulets around their necks, handmade clay silver wood. The site is hotter than you expected, the air thick with the scent of cracked limestone and flowering reeds. You descend into the chamber slowly. It's smaller than Setari's tomb, rougher, less finished. But the moment you enter, you feel it. That hush, that presence. On the far wall, a painted scene. Two figures seated across from each other. A woman with a crown of stars. A man with a simple staff. Between them, a pool of water. And below them, the spiral. Larger than ever, stretching across the entire lower wall. But this time, it opens into something. A doorway. And within that doorway, not metaphorically, literally, a painted figure dressed in modern clothes, hands outstretched toward the spiral palm pressed to the stone. You stumble backward, gasp. The others don't see it. It's not visible from the entrance. Only up close. Only for you. There's no scientific explanation. Not even fringe archaeology dares suggest paintings that predict visitors from millennia in the future. But there it is. The figure is you. And beside the figure, one word in hieroglyphs: witness. You stand there for a long time. The others are busy with measurements, photographs, excited chatter, but you don't hear them. You're somewhere else. Back at the oasis. Back in the mirror pool. Back in the room where you found the scroll. And you understand now. You were never just meant to tell Setari's story. You were part of it. Always. The spiral didn't begin with her. And it won't end with you. It's older than names. Older than grief. It is the path itself. The winding, endless, gently turning shape of stories that refuse to be buried. You return to the surface in silence. Later that night, you sit beneath the stars and place your hand on the earth. It feels warm, like breath, like heartbeat. And somewhere below, far beneath your palm, you feel the spiral turning again. The days following the Luxor chamber discovery are hazy, thick with dust, and questions no one quite wants to ask aloud. Official reports refer to the spiral simply as unusual symbolic repetition. The painted figure chalked up to coincidence, pareidolia, or tricks of mineral stain. But you know better. Not because you're clinging to fantasy, because the feeling won't leave. That calm gravity, that hush, that spiral. You return home, but you're not the same. You carry the weight of having been seen, painted, named, witnessed in reverse. And deep down, you know Setari's spiral was never a closed loop. It was a thread meant to be passed on. You find yourself invited to speak in places you never expected. Not just universities, but retreats, storytelling circles, spiritual conferences, and always you begin the same way. You draw a spiral, and you say, "Let me tell you about a woman who waited 3,000 years to be heard." Every time you say her name, Setari, you feel something subtle shift, like breath-warming glass. At one event, a young woman approaches you after the talk. She says she had a dream about a veiled figure by a still lake whispering a name that sounded like stars. You don't need to ask. You just hand her a carved spiral you've kept in your pocket since Luxor. She smiles. "I think she's still walking," she says. You nod. She always was. The movement grows slowly, quietly. Not a cult, not a trend, something gentler. A community of listeners, of witnesses. They begin writing letters to unnamed ancestors, burying small spirals in the dirt, leaving lotus petals on park benches. No hashtags, no manifesto, just memory. And somewhere in that gentle tide of remembrance, you realize something. You're no longer just carrying her story. You're carrying others, not all of them as ancient. Some are modern, recent, forgotten people. Silenced love, unmarked grief, and the spiral begins to bend around them too. You start receiving letters, packages, stories. One includes a hand-drawn map of a remote canyon in Jordan with a single word in the margin echo. Another contains a photograph of a child's grave in Ireland with a stone spiral etched beside it, added recently discreetly. You begin cataloging them, not with carbon dates, but with meaning. A new kind of archaeology, not of artifacts, of remembrance. Historians still argue whether memory has value without proof, whether myth can teach anything science cannot. You let them argue. You return to the museum one afternoon, years since your first encounter. Setari's case hasn't changed, but something around it has. More visitors linger here now. Some sit on the bench across from her and close their eyes. One elderly man places a spiral pin on the velvet barrier and bows his head. A child whispers she's sleeping, but not gone. And you realize the spiral is working, not as a symbol, as an invitation to feel, to wait, to hold space for stories not yet ready to rise. You lean close to the glass and speak softly. I've seen more spirals, Setari. And though no sound answers, you feel her smile. You step back, and in the reflection of the glass, just for an instant, you see something behind you. Not a shadow, not a person. A spiral of golden petals drifting downward as if from a hand just out of sight. And when you turn, only air, only silence. But you know better. She's not gone. She's never gone. She's just walking a little further ahead now, waiting for the next witness. You begin to keep a new notebook, not for facts or measurements or institutional grant proposals. This one's different. You title it simply Echoes I've Met. Inside, you catalog dreams, whispers, half-told stories shared over tea by strangers who somehow seem to know her. Setari isn't fading. She's rippling. Every spiral you encounter now carries the weight of more than one life. And you start to realize Setari was never just one woman. She was a pattern, a shape that grief and love and patience can take. She is the name given to all that endures in silence and asks only to be held. In time, others begin sharing their own Setari, a forgotten grandmother whose wedding dress was found buried in the wall, a lost child whose name returned in a dream, a partner who died before they could marry, but who still shows up in the corner of photographs. Each story ends with a whisper of the spiral, a ring, a pool, a stillness that speaks. You start to see them everywhere. On subway tiles, in snail shells, in how people curl into sleep. Not everything is sacred, but anything can be. And now you know how to notice. You return to Luxor again, this time with no team, no agenda. Just a journal and a ring you now wear around your neck. Not Setari's original ring. That one stayed where it belonged. But a replica you had carved from olive wood. You descend into her tomb once more alone. And the moment you enter, you feel it. Not just her, but them, Setari and Ahmin. The weight of their waiting is gone, but their presence remains. Like perfume in the folds of an old letter. You don't speak, you just sit with them. And for the first time, you don't feel like a visitor. You feel like family. You pull out your notebook, add a final entry. Some stories don't sleep because they're haunted. They sleep because they're sacred. Then you add, she waited, he walked, and together they open the door for all of us. You place the notebook beneath a loose tile near the back wall, one that only you know shifts if pressed the right way. You don't want fame. You want continuity. You want someone 100 or 1,000 years from now to stumble into this tomb and feel the same hush you did, to feel chosen by silence. You return to the surface dusk, washing the sky in soft lilac and gold. As you walk away from the tomb, you stop and look back just once. The entrance is already half covered in sand again. The spiral always buries itself until it's ready to turn again. And in the sand near your footprints, you notice something odd. 2 new prints, barefoot, side by side, facing forward. You smile, because you are no longer alone in this. Setari's story is yours now, and yours is someone else's to carry next, because the spiral never ends. It only widens. Back home, life resumes with its usual rhythms, bills to pay, keys to misplaced groceries to forget. But something in you has shifted beyond repair, or perhaps beyond restoration, not broken, rethreaded. You don't speak of Setari often now, not because you've forgotten, but because she no longer needs to be explained. She's become part of how you move, how you pause before answering, how you touch walls as you pass them, how you trace slow spirals into condensation on cafe windows. You find yourself noticing people more, especially those who move quietly, those who linger at the edges of conversations, those who carry silences the way others carry rings. One afternoon at a campus bench, you sit beside a woman who holds a cracked photo in her lap. She's not crying, just staring at it as if waiting for it to speak. You don't ask what it means. You just hand her a folded piece of paper. On it, a spiral. And 2 words, still listening. She looks at you, tears in her eyes, not from pain, but from being seen. And just like that, Setari moves again. Not as myth, as method, as a way of bearing witness to what the world tries to bury. You begin noticing spiral graffiti in places you've never seen it before, under bridge rails on abandoned buildings, scratched into the bark of a tree behind the university library. Sometimes it's paired with a name. Sometimes it's just there, Once you find one drawn on a hospital wall, chalked in pastel blue, fading next to a pair of initials and a date. You photograph each one, cataloging them in a folder titled Echo Sites. The spiral spreads, and not in the way of trends or memes. More like pollen, silent, purposeful, capable of blooming something ancient in the cracks of modern life. You receive a letter from a monastery in Greece, enclosed a piece of ceramic tile with a spiral etched into it and a note that reads, "Found behind the chapel's altar, thought you should see it. It was buried under incense ash." Another package arrives from Japan, a child's drawing of a girl in a veil, holding hands with a lion-headed figure under a sky full of spirals. The world is listening. It always was. We just forgot how to tune in. Mainstream scholars begin to cite your work in increasingly curious ways. Some still scoff. Others reference it with cautious reverence, like handling something warm that might still be alive. You don't push. You spiral. Returning to core truths, widening gently, leaving space. You start every new lecture with a pause, not for drama, for invitation. And then you draw the spiral, always in silence. And someone in the room always sighs, as if recognizing a sound they didn't know they were holding inside. You visit Setari again, not for research, not even for ritual, just to sit. Her display now includes a small carved ring replica, respectfully labeled. Beneath it, an open journal preserved under glass, a reproduction of the scroll you once found in her tomb. The last visible line reads, "So I married silence instead." Visitors pause longer here now. Some leave notes, some press their palms to the glass. And one day, as you step away, you hear a child behind you ask, "Will she wake up someday?" And their mother answers gently, "She already did." Years pass like feathers drifting down a staircase, soft, slow, and each one carrying more weight than you expect. You grow older, not ancient, but steady. And still the spiral turns. You're no longer just a historian. People now call you a listener. Some say you started a movement. You correct them. "I just heard her." That's all it ever was. A spiral doesn't begin, it reveals. In your home office, beside weathered shelves of scrolls and translated papyri, sits a small wooden box. Inside it, a stone from the spiral plateau, a dried lotus petal from Setari's tomb, and the olive wood ring. You never wear it anymore, but it rests. Everything that matters eventually does. You're invited one last time to speak, this time not in a lecture hall, but at a museum dedication. They're opening a new wing designed not around dynasties or kingdoms, but stories. Personal ones, forgotten ones. At its center, a room called the Spiral Gallery. And at the heart of that gallery, Setari. Her sarcophagus isn't there. That remains where it belongs. But her presence is. Her story told through light and scent and stillness. A room that breathes, that listens. The exhibit ends with an interactive spiral etched into the floor. Guests walk its path. At the center, they're encouraged to whisper a name. Not theirs, someone else's. Someone they don't want forgotten. You walk it last, not as a guest, not even as a witness, as a bearer. And when you reach the center, you close your eyes and whisper, "Setari," and a second name, Ahmin. And maybe you imagine it, or maybe not, but you feel someone take your hand. Warm, still, familiar. You don't open your eyes. You don't need to. When you finally return home, there's one more letter waiting. No return address, no writing on the envelope. Inside, a blank card, except for a spiral, and below it, 5 simple words. She was never truly alone. You exhale slowly, smile, set the card beside your notebook. The one now filled with hundreds of entries, thousands of names, endless curves curling inward and outward, like memory, like breath, like time. You write one last line. She walked with silence, but we walked with her. And then you close the notebook. Let it rest. Let yourself rest. Because the story is told. Because the spiral always turns. Because she is sleeping now, but not buried, not forgotten, only remembered. By you, by them. By all who ever walked softly into mystery and found a name waiting in the quiet. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and drift. She's still here, still dreaming, still spiraling gently through the soft hush of time. And you're part of the dream now. Let go. Sleep well, so now just breathe. Let the story settle around you like linen on skin, like warm sand after sunset. You've walked a long way tonight through moonlit tombs, down spiral corridors of memory and silence, past veils and vows and echoing names. Sitari isn't just a name in a case. She's a reminder that love is patient, that grief can be tender, and that some stories wait for exactly the right ears before they unfold. And tonight, those ears were yours. Let your body sink. Let your chest rise and fall steady as the desert wind. Picture the spiral soft and slow, unfurling beneath your feet. You don't need to rush. There is nothing else you need to do. Nothing to fix. Nothing to prove. Just rest. She's sleeping now, and so are you. The night is still. The stars drift, and far away, perhaps just beyond your dream's horizon, someone places a veil gently beside a ring and smiles. You've kept her company, and now she's keeping yours. So drift, softly, easily. Let the silence be enough. And remember, the spiral always comes back. It always brings you home.